2A. Very good to all I am. Sergio Vera, the content director of FIVI of this fair, this International Festival of Inclusive Video Games here we all play, that is being held in Cuenca from January 18th to 20. I am the creator of the project as well of accessibility VÍDEO blind, and this is being carried out thanks to the collaboration with the other director of layman of the Embassy of the Cultural Center of the United States Embassy in Cuenca and the FOB, and thanks also to the sponsorship of the Cuenca Deputation of the Board of Communities of Castilla-La Mancha and the University of Castilla-La Mancha. Well, today we are here for one of the great contributions of things that I am most proud of, this FIVI, which is the creation of this platform for the development of inclusive video games, and we are going to introduce you, then we will explain what all this consists of, but we are going to present you the first project of this platform with which we want to contribute our grain of sand to increase the number of video games for everyone, and this first project is called nothing more and nothing less than Dark Atlas Infernum, and it is from Night Concil Studios. We have here the honor and the pleasure, by the way, I have forgotten to describe myself. I am the same as the one in the last Tofa's video, but just in case not yet have you seen it, I recommend that you take a look at it. I'm still that bad-tempered 37-year-old guy who once had hair on his head and whose grandmother said he was the most handsome in the world, but now only his mother did it. My wife doesn't quite agree, and now I do introduce you to our brand new guests. We have here Álvaro Aparicio, who is the game designer of this Dark Atlas Infernum game. Thank you very much for joining us, Álvaro. It's a real pleasure. Do you want me to proceed to the meeting? Yes, furthermore, you are a writer because this video game was previously a book, an audio book, so show off. What pressure? Well, I'm going to say that I'm going to say a 38-year-old man or a guy from Uruguay with excessively long hair due to the laziness of going to the hairdresser and perhaps too much hair on my face, both on the upper part of the lip and on the lower part. It is time for me to shave a little, and Roberto too, although he does not recognize it. The effects of video games is that you shave little and nothing. It is a real pleasure to be here, Sergio. In honor, of course, it makes me want to marry you after that description. I am already married. Last thing has been allowed in this country. We do not feel, and here we have the great Roberto González, who is the one I know to say you have to add this to the game, you have to add that, and he is the programmer of the game. But I have also heard innovation and quality before. That is more cool. Yes, that is a title that was just assigned to me. About flight is what each one has that, but he has more salary or he doesn't have more salary. If not, why do you want the new title? No good having more salary than 00 is considered within the range. O or no s. Yes, well, I always say that in this I can double my salary, I can triple it, and the budget will not be affected by it. So yes, as is. Well, nothing said. I'm Roberto. I think we're all on the same farm. So, the same age. Are you one of those with hair or those with no hair? At the moment of hair, the thing is already beginning to clear up in the back, but at the moment it is almost orange or almost lemon. There are no half measures here, so that and nothing said. Programmer, developer, hey, who have they cajoled to do to start to develop this, and there I went because of his accent. You can see that he is a Canarian, but yes, but it was time to look for beans in England, so I am a Canarian feeling cold right now. Well then, let's start talking to Álvaro and have him tell us how this video game arises and what genre does it belong to, because, well, go tell us how the video game arises, how the studio arises, because you were you are the Original gamete of all this, yes, a little yes, in the end the philosophy of this project and of the which preceded it, which is the version published on paper and also the one that is in the audio series that you can listen to on the Noam Nocturna podcast, which is Atlas Negro. It is always exclusive to IATS. It had a very collective philosophy, because so that we understand each other. Atlas Negro, which it is the name in Spanish of the work Dark Atlas in English, and it began as conceptually the idea that the end of the world was going to come, but it was going to come through the continuous manifestation of spirits on earth after each storm. A series of events occurred, natural phenomena, the largest storms, and after they faded, the storm front went, the world was filled with manifestations of entities. What happens is that unlike many apocalyptic scenarios where the end is determined by something very active at the level of the terror that pursues you, that wants your evil, these entities that manifest themselves are indifferent. They are still in an industrial estate. They can appear in your kitchen, they don't care, they don't move, they do not seem to react to any type of external stimulus. So that apocalypse we are talking about is truly a social collapse, because civilization gradually also conforms to the fact that the phenomenon is increasing and there are more and more of these entities everywhere, and touching them is dangerous because they are radioactive. Radioactive in the sense that they degenerate you energetically. They have a lot of very cold states of altered consciousness. It is better not to approach them in the end. This initial indifference generates many questions. For example, we have the resurgence of religions as a response to everything. We also have capitalism looking for a way to make the phenomenon profitable. We also have sects in some way, bringing together the people who are more inclined to marginalize mainstream religious ideas. We have a state of government that can't answer any of these problems, just like the Pope and just like any religious figure that's trying to guide people through this, because people wonder, and what kind of dead are these? Because there is one thing that I have not said, and that is that the entities that respond to the name of footprint, they are very vague physically speaking. You get close, and when you see them you really don't know what features they have, because they are like too many evec present, too many etas, so we don't know what dead they are. If anything, they are dead because they don't interact with us in the end. So much is like this, and all this is in nulls. That it is a town in Valencia that sent the town hall an email, and I think they didn't like my proposal, but well, I told them, hey, the work begins, your town begins, a town in Spain that is totally beach town from the 60s with its typical red and green brick farms. And I said, here, a schism in the Vatican is mounting. Sugan. Because on a balcony overlooking the sea a footprint appears that looks like Jesus Christ, and the Vatican says in no way is this not Jesus Christ, and there is a mess that makes you crazy like this. The story begins like this. This is how the story begins a little. Everyone he knows that when the apocalypse begins, it will happen in Valencia, everyone agrees, and there will be many firecrackers and many foies and orcada. But you will see rivers of orcada through the devastated streets of Valencia. The point is that, well, one of the factors of the work, both the original as at the video game level, it is very cool for us to notice that we are in Spain. At the end of the day, we haven't gone to Manhattan, we haven't gone to the big cities that, cinematically speaking, always represent the center of all evils, a great salvation. We have not gone to a town of Valencia somewhere lost by the hand of God, and the story takes place within what the video game is, in a building that is the Vigilant Angel that is in Madrid, well in the Sierra de Guadarrama. Then this building really exists, and no Vigilante, no, I wish it existed. I wish it would be awesome, because I'm doing it also in the video game. It would be great. No, it doesn't exist, but the geographical reference is real, so. that you have a reference that the closest town in on a literary level is Colado Medio, if you see Col Colado Medio, so many kilometers away in your imagination, the watching angel is there, the thing said it, and tell us a little bit about how it becomes, if you want, I'll give you the word now, Roberto, how does it arise? This story becomes a video game and how do you get to it so we alternate between you pin pam pom? Well then go ahead Roberto. Well how do I get there because how do I start this? Is on your part basically what we were talking about off camera that on me. Side I was developing a master's degree I was working well sorry I was studying a master's degree in video game development I on my daily life I am a web developer so I was and I am dedicated to developing web applications the job is boring but of course I have always had the annoying thorn of development about video games. I believe that at the end of the day every programmer has a little bit of that side is always there except for my wife. My wife is also a web programmer. Yes, well, look, and as I said, I started studying a master's degree. Well, for trying to get and do something and I was a big fan of Nocturnal November and Black Atlas aha. So I listened to all the stories about Nocturnal November about Black Atlas and so on and the surprise was huge when once Álvaro spoke to me on Twitter saying that they had seen a couple of my posts where I was uploading the work I was doing with a video game that I was developing at that time for the end of my master's degree and that they were very cool with what I was doing and I was jumping with joy because I was going to start working with the people that I appreciated and that I was still on the internet so I signed up without thinking about it and coming back to you then Álvaro how this story Alcalaret becomes in a video game well the story the founding seed is that a day on Twitter is also a kind of magical or haunted place depending on the day I receive or the message from a boy who proposes to me to make a video game like on the internet. Many things are proposed sometimes not going anywhere because at the same time in the end, people propose but we have to work. I told him, bring me a dossier of several pages. Show me that this is a good idea and we'll put together a team and we'll move forward. I also have a computer profile, so it happens that I hit everything a little bit. Admin to programming to whatever is needed I'm a guy for everything and I like the idea of making a video game because I've also made 19 levels since I don't know since I played Doom of 93 I've always wanted to do something a little more with more the entity, the boy brought the document, seemed very good to me. From there, the study began to be set up. Very shortly after that, when Roberto came in, that is, really, one of the people who were there at that time, many are no longer here because in the end, like all these projects, people are leaving, they are staying along the way. In fact, with Roberto we decided to restart the project at a given moment because we had an approach that we believed was appropriate but that was very limiting when it came to doing, for example, what we do now that it is totally different from what we were doing at that time. And from that day until now, it is true that at the beginning, as we were on the one hand getting hold of the work tools and trying to hook the pieces at a conceptual level of the game itself, there are times when it is very cool to be able to plan everything in advance but in others that it is impossible because until you see it you are not in front of the place and say hey, I'm going to approach it this way, you don't know how you are going to solve it, you have notions in it. Has happened to us a lot of times that I had to pivot between uncertainties to see how this can be resolved, but both on a technical level and on a creative level. I hear about you and this game from my friend Miguel Angel. I know that he is my friend of fatigue in video blinds for him Kickstarter and then he tells me that he has financed this game and that he has written to you to see if you want to introduce accessibility to it and in this he answers me Necroraptor. On Twitter, who I think is
por Twitter, que creo
Roberto's alter ego exactly, and we start talking. First we try that demo and we
primero probamos esa demo y
get a first idea. We write to him, hey, would you be interested? This tells me yes, and well, and we had a first conversation. I was interviewing him about the approach of the game, so we have said it is a first person game. It is a game that is between the narrative adventure and survival horror. Will now be explained by them better than me, who are the parents of the creature. And then we did a first interview to see what mechanics the game was going to have, to advise them on what it should have, accessibility for different types of auditory barriers, visual, motor, intellectual, and this is going to emerge this first demo that you will be able to test at the fair end. That all those who want to join the project will be able to sign up to contribute that shout of sand to improve its accessibility. FIVI's website at Cuenca.com. Barfi. Now after these promotional minutes, we resume. So okay, tell us a little bit then if you want. I think we can show, because Roberto told me that you could show images. You can show both how to play and the options of accessibility, so that viewers can get an idea. If you can write a little for those of us who are not seeing you, although we are listening to you. Yes, give me a couple of minutes and I'll start. Okay, if you want. While Rob starts, I'll tell you a couple of things. Okay, one of the peculiarities that our game has is the sound treatment, but for several reasons. The first is that among our references is the Dark Project, which is a game by Looking Glass, which is one of the first games that impressed me, is from 9798, because it is a first-person game where you play a thief in a medieval environment, but the sound is everything. In fact, visually the game is very poor, but you didn't care because the sound surrounded your atmosphere. The footsteps, you stepped on wood and it was wood. You stepped on metal and it resonated to metal. Depending on whether you were crouching or standing, it sounded one way or another. When you came out of a room into a hallway, you could hear the current of air. It was incredibly immersive. That's when you realize how powerful the sound can be when it is well designed, because we always go from the visual to the visual to the visual, but the sound is much more evocative, because even when the game is not very interesting, from an aesthetic point of view, if you have a good sound, what you don't just deny seeing, what you recreate in your mind is very sensory. So the sound treatment that we wanted to give to Dark Atlas is very much in line with that of the Vigilant Angel. When you move through the corridors, when you explore a little, you feel that you can hear those bells from Los Balcones that are moved by the wind, that you hear voices behind a door that cannot be opened, that you hear diverse atmospheres that make the place alive, because I have found a lot of games that are very cool, but then they are dead. At the level sound, there is a lot of tendency to forget that. I don't know why. Maybe it's that my player profile is to pay a lot of attention to that, but our philosophy is, we finish the place, that is, we just built it, we just lit it up, and we started to sound like some people. Bastards, no. Basically, okay, I have it here. I'm going to share the screen so that you can be seen in your recording, Álvaro, while I too. Okay, perfect. What I think is that the audio will not be transmitted for the video call of there we are. Okay, GZ has been added to the main screen. There we are sharing the screen. Okay, so this a COD mode allows you to play using the menu. No, but hey, whoever wants, you LL tell it, and then whoever wants to experience it, try it. Don't mention that we have several accessibility options, but of course, thinking about the issue of accessibility, well, to be able to play it without having to have a monitor, a screen in front of you, the Options we have, wait a second, yes, right off the bat, what you see here is good. Welcome to the guided movement tutorial. Yes. What happens is that I'm going to change the options for a second from here. The game has several levels of accessibility. On the one hand we have that. The basic thing is the audio description. Adding the audio description is for many games of course because one has to make AI study a little of what is on the market, take options from what there is and except for some good options that I have found, such as Last of Us, I think it had a good accessibility issue. The options that I have found, for example, games like Diablo 4 or some other options that I have played the menu simply, that is, they are simply in charge of reading what you have on the screen and that's it, but you can't, or it gave me the feeling that I can't play just by hearing from heard is to tell. You, that is to say, in fact, in the options of Diablo 4 when I activated, it is that when players appeared on the screen it was dedicated to reading nicknames and the voice went crazy. So hey, what we have in the game included is, apart from the reading what appears on the screen, the system is called a screen reader. Exactly, the system behind it has a, let's say, hidden text that adds a description X, which would be, for example, if you perform some type of action or if you need to do something. There are certain texts that are attached that for the screen it is not necessary to show it, but they are described in a way using the voice that we have from the text to speech behind, so that would be the first option that we have that would be suitable for a separate podcast to explain how to find and how to use a Unity plugin for this, because it was a real nightmare. There is still a lot of world left for at the level of Unity and engines is to use accessibility to facilitate it for developers. It is not accessible for developers. Accessibility, it is not. The truth is that no. And then apart from others that we have, such as subtitle topics, that was something that they asked us for as soon as we came out in the game, in the forums, in the Steam forums, the players were already asking us for subtitles. The following topics of accessibility that we added them was already as a result of the advice you gave us. The issue of, for example, using, I call it closed captions, but I don't know how to say it in Spanish. There is no word, but it is the subtitle for the sound effects. Exactly, when a phone rings, when you hear a door or something, you get a line of subtitles where you can read sounds that are happening around you and that you cannot see because maybe you are not looking at that part of the room at that moment. Done in the prologue. If you can't hear it well, for that in the prologue it's quite good because there is a part where a phone rings, but of course the phone rings behind you. For a player who can hear the phone, yes, with the 3D sound you can locate it, it turns around, but with it if you can't hear Eligo. With the CL cap you also have access to the color blindness filter. I am inexperienced with the whole accessibility issue. Until I started with this I didn't know that there were so many different types of color blindness. I think I remember that we have, if not there were, like 8 or 9 different filters. If I have counted 9. Well, you have more than the vast majority of games that have ableism filters that have 3. Generally it is that you are seeing options and looking at games that they have 3 options. I don't know if they are the most common or if they are included in different ones, but in fact I can see them here in the accessibility menu at Protanopia. Peria Protonal Dueranopia Duet Anomaly. Tritonopia and Tritonomaly Enicon __ Achromatopsia. The names are in English. But come on, they are all perfectly located. The only thing we need is Playtaster to be able to verify them and see that the filters work correctly, and then a mode that really is an accessibility mode is curious because many times, when it comes To applying some accessibility, there is a little left. Some options that are accessibility, but it remains a bit in the mist between options that are for players of the vast majority or accessibility options we have an enemies mode in the game. There is an enemy that chases you and marries you, gives you a house, so we have several options for the enemy without an enemy basically. If you want to play the game in a relaxed way and dedicate yourself to the puzzles without having to worry about being hunted and killed during the games in the game, there is a mechanic that makes the enemy invisible. And in the demo you can see the enemy is invisible, and through a system of one of a camera that you have to equip you can see the enemy, but of course while you play normally you don't see the enemy, you only hear him. So you can also activate it, always see the enemy, in case you don't want to be playing with that mechanic or directly use the normal mode of the game. I say that it is like an option that is a little diffuse between the accessibility options or not, because many times we consider whether to activate the game, and when you start it give the option to play it as a graphic adventure or as a survival, or because there are players many times those options already hide it from you when you are going to start a game and they tell you, do you want to play the story mode or the non-story mode? I know if combat mode, or many times they hide it from you behind some options, but it really is a bit diffuse. And finally, well, apart from the audio issue we have stereo or playing it in mono, which is also something that we intuitively add precisely afterwards, and that a colleague of the Dell does not belong to the studio but is a colleague very close to the studio. It turns out that he has a lack of hearing in one of the two ears in the game, the voice, and certain conversations occur on the left or the right, because there is a character who is speaking to you from inside your head, but you hear him as if he were rotating around you or as if he were speaking to you from the sides. Of course, when that happens, when you have a lack of hearing in one of your ears and the character speaks to you through that ear, you lose the conversation. So we also have the mono mode or the stereo mode activated to be able to give accessibility to those types of situations. Mod and the crown jewel, I call it the guided movement mode. You had given me a name, more technical, navigation assistance they usually call it also this. Now when you explain it, it is not only interesting for blind people, but for example for motor barrier issues, because it makes it very easy to handle. Yes, it was the idea was that it was not only for blind people, but rather it is for a wide spectrum of issues, such as if you cannot use devices or move quickly during the game, if you have problems aiming and so on, being able to use the game and play in a relaxed manner. On the screen we see how the game starts, and since the character is still and you simply have a vision of the instance here in the audio description, it tells you I have the audio removed so that I don't get stepped on while I'm explaining it. It tells you the situation and end the description. Where is it if you have the audio description activated? Because this guided movement mode does not have to go with the audio description. You can simply play in guided mode but viewing everything on the screen, and with the guided movement system you can select from a menu where you want to move from that point. Say if you are right now, we are at the entrance to the atrium, we can move towards the south area or the north area. The character automatically walks towards that area, and when he reaches the next area he activates the following description of where we are in that area. We now see a separate menu for a person who does not have the ability to see the screen, and us plays with the audio description mode. You can play with the controller, and with the D-pad using up or down you can move between the locations where you can move from where you are, and if you use left or right you can navigate between the objects that you have within reach. In this case we have a note to read. Selecting the note also focuses on the object that is going to be used, and when using the note, well, you can see the text of the note on the screen and to be read with the Audio description. With this to also say that there are very few games currently.
Muy pocos juegos en la actualidad.
Less than 10 that I know of that have audio description on the market and that I
Que tengan audiodescripción en el mercado.
know of in Spain. I don't know there is one that has helped to develop 11, but since it is not a commercial game, I will not put it in the same bag, and furthermore I have not tried it. As far as I know, this is going to be the first game, not only the most accessible video game developed in Spain, but the first that has audio description. Well, the truth is that it is an interesting path to open it for development. And what I said basically to show a little more, we have moved to another location and we have more objects to use than simply a radio, a door that is locked, in a note. Using this system, the game is greatly simplified for the issue of motor disability, visual disability, in which you no longer need to move and search for objects freely, but it becomes many times when I show the game, people say, what has happened to be a Monkey Island? Yes it is. Like Riven the Mist, all the dragon lore, or all these types of games. Then the game changes radically from the system and becomes a totally narrative adventure, a classic style graphic adventure. Obviously in this mode the enemy is not activated because there is no possibility that he can run using this system, but you transform the game into a totally different adventure, and with simply a crosshair and 2 buttons you can of course. This also seems very interesting to me, that I always say that accessibility is not disability. This would allow my mother to be able to play this game, while if my mother had to operate a camera in first person, point 1, she would have gotten dizzy after 2 seconds, and point 2 after 5 seconds she would have having said that, no, I don't play this. Yes, exactly. So, it works for all players. I think that whoever wants to play survival horror has that option, but whoever wants this more leisurely adventure, this narrative adventure, well, here it is complete. So well, no. I know if you have, because I don't know how much time is left. Well, we've been waiting a moment and I'll tell you how long we've been. 32 minutes. Closing. So if you want to explain something else not from my side, just comment a little. It seems to be from my point of view, it seems this is starting to move. In the last year, all the documentation that I have found, the accessibility issue that I find, everything is relatively recent, but there is still a long way to go to explore here, especially when it comes to presenting this to the developers. I have seen accessibility documentation at the Microsoft level, or associations that give generic guides and guides, let's say, on how to implement, but there are never plug-in examples or code directly for this. So there is a long way to go when it comes to implementing accessibility in video games to be able to give it to the developers. So there is a great world here, and also great job opportunities here. There is a lack of a community of developers who put all this together. Exactly. To give an example, when I was struggling to find plugins, I found a couple of communities of development that I normally use, and I asked, like, does anyone have a plugin for text-to-speech that uses a voice system that doesn't sound like a robotic voice, and so on, and what most of the players, developers told me or talked to me to put ideas in common were to search for artificial intelligence to give voices to characters, but it was never with the intention of using it for accessibility, but simply to give life to their games, using voices and so on, and no one had thought of using these plugins that read text for the accessibility issue. Then we have to give more exposure to this and say that this plugin is very good because it uses the voice of the platform. Roberto told you, after testing it, it uses the Windows narrator voice, and then when the ports are made, we wait. Let's use the Xbox One, which is also a narrator, and let's see if it also uses the PlayStation 1. Yes, it would be the intention to see how things go, since we don't have access to the development kits. But it would be the intention to use it. Well, we're not going to close anything. Once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart not only for joining us today on this adventure of this first International Fair of Inclusive Video Games and this platform, but for everything we have done before and everything we have left to do so many. Thank you Álvaro for this idea for this wonderful world, and thank you very much Roberto for all the hard work you are putting in from London. I know that in London you get bored, but I really appreciate it too. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Just also encourage other studios to contact us so much you can connect. Contact me on Twitter at videosigis or even my email sergivervalency@gmail.com or through fi@fablabcuenca.com barfi and above. All the aspiring playtesters, we need everything, people with everything type of abilities, and not only with disabilities, people who also want to contribute their grain of sand. Hey, well, I would like to try this game, right to us too, and nothing said. We are waiting for you, and FIVI we are waiting for here. We all play. Thank you very much, and end. Thank you very much. A hug to Álvaro, a hug Roberto, an enchanted pleasure.
Álvaro, un abrazo Roberto.
Un placer.
Encantado.